Hello, everyone. Before we start, I want you to know that this event will be recorded. Welcome to the Robert H. Merriman Commemorative Plaque Fundraising Project. We are so glad that you have joined us today, the official launch of our project and website. The website is hosted by the Department of Spanish and Portuguese here at UC Berkeley and allows people to learn about Robert Merriman, about the nature of this project, and to donate funds for the installation of a memorial in his honor here on the Berkeley campus. Our program will be followed by a Q&A. I'm Peter Glazer, a professor in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies here at UC Berkeley and a longtime member of the Board of Governors of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, and will moderate today's event. ALBA, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, is an educational nonprofit dedicated to promoting social activism and the defense of human rights, inspired by the American volunteers of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, who fought fascism in the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939. This memorial is exactly the kind of work that ALBA champions. I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. Though this event is virtual, it is grounded in the Berkeley campus where this memorial will eventually reside. We recognize that Berkeley sits on the territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Mukwema Ohlone tribe and other familiar descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Before continuing, I'd also like to mention that running a Zoom webinar is new to us all, so if this isn't perfectly smooth or there are glitches along the way, we beg your indulgence. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of some important folks in our audience today. Warren LaRude is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who co-wrote a biography of Robert Merriman with Merriman's widow, Marion Merriman Wachtel. We are also honored to have Josie Urek, Nancy Wallach, Linda Lustig, Paul Blanc, and Martha Jarocki, all of them the children of Spanish Civil War volunteers. If there are others whose relatives volunteered during the war, I'm sorry I missed you. You can announce yourselves in the questions, and we will try to recognize you as the program continues. To offer some context, the Spanish Civil War began in July 1936 as a military coup intending to destroy the democratically elected Spanish government. The rebellion, led by General Francisco Franco, was supported by Hitler and Mussolini and their military machines. To help defend the Spanish Republic against the combined forces of fascism, 30,000 volunteers from 52 countries came to Spain and formed the International Brigades. Bob Merriman, then a graduate student in economics at UC Berkeley, was one of them and became the first American commander of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in Spain, where he eventually lost his life. He disappeared, likely captured and executed by the fascists, and his body was never found. Historian John Kenneth Galbraith, one of Merriman's classmates, called him, quote, "the most popular of my generation of graduate students here at Berkeley." Later, Galbraith continued, he would show himself the bravest. This memorial is meant to honor his bravery and that of the diverse group of U.S. volunteers who fought fascism in Spain in the spirit of internationalism. Merriman met and impressed Ernest Hemingway in Spain and is said to have been the model for Robert Jordan in For Whom the Bell Tolls. So up to the present moment, so much has been done already to make this memorial project possible. Thanks so much to the dogged efforts of Donna Southard and Claude Potts, who will be speaking soon. We would not be here today without the thoughtful deliberation and approval of the Space Assignments and Capital Improvements Committee, SACI, here on the campus, campus architect Wendy Hills, the Standing Committee for Public Outdoor Art Installations, Rebecca Sachiko-Rickson from the Development Team for Letters and Science, Assistant Vice Chancellor Lisa Alvarez-Cohn, and Chancellor Christ. Very special thanks as well to the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, which has supported this project from the very beginning, agreeing to act as campus sponsors and host the fundraising page on their department website. Professor Michael Yarochi was department chair when the project began and was interested in supporting it at that time, and present chair, Professor Estelle Tarica, continues the work now. You will meet them shortly as well. The campus has already approved the installation of the Merriman plaque on Memorial Glade. And now all we need to do is raise $47,000 to make that possible. And I think any of you who understand the bureaucracy of a university such as this, that approval was a huge step in this process, and the efforts that went into the application and sort of riding that process through. A few early donations have already come in, but have just scratched the surface. Today's event will formally begin the fundraising, and a live event is also planned for later this fall. Robert Merriman, born in Eureka, California, and raised in Santa Cruz, was an undergraduate at the University of Nevada in Reno, where he met and married his wife, Marion, who later joined him in Spain and became a member of the Lincoln Brigade there. I believe one of the few women, if not the only woman in uniform, as part of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. Marion went on to help found the Bay Area Post of the Veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, a precursor to ALBA. Obviously, she was a very important figure in the Bay Area commemorative community. To begin our program, let me introduce Estelle Tarica and Michael Yarochi. Estelle is a professor of Latin American literatures and cultures and the current chair of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. She is also the former chair of the Latin American Studies program at UC Berkeley. Michael is a professor of modern Spanish literature and culture, 18th to 21st centuries, here at UC Berkeley, of course. He was previous chair of the department and is now Associate Dean of Arts and Humanities, and was the person who agreed to have the department serve as the sponsor of this project. So allow me to welcome Estelle and Michael.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's an honor for me to be present at this event and to be one of the people speaking on behalf of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at UC Berkeley. Peter already recognized some of the many people who've been helping bring the memorial to fruition and who worked on the many tasks that this kind of international and multi-institutional project entails. I'd like to repeat our thanks to Claude Potts, the UC Berkeley Librarian for Romance Language Collections, and Donna Southard, the Assistant Director of Language Instruction in our department, both of whom have played a leadership role in this effort. And I also want to acknowledge Gregory Paulette-Young, our department manager, who's been offering key administrative assistance and is working behind the scenes tonight on this webinar, as well as Max Maloney, our undergraduate major advisor, who created a website for the fundraising part of this project. And of course, thank you to our colleague, Peter Glazer, for being the MC today. The collective and collaborative efforts of all these people underscore that the memory of the Spanish Civil War is important to scholars and teachers across campus in different departments and in different places. It's a credit to UC Berkeley that one of its own joined in the Republican defense of Spain, and it is entirely fitting that we work now to make it possible for Merriman's sacrifice to be memorialized on our campus, and that it become a site of remembrance that can teach and inspire new generations of Berkeley students. So thank you all, those of you who are here with us tonight, for joining us in this work. I'm going to hand off now to my colleague, Professor Michael Yarochi, who is the former chair of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese and who was really instrumental in bringing the department on as a sponsor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle, and thanks to everybody who has been organizing to bring this, bring us to this moment in this amazing project. I thought I would speak in my dual capacity as former chair of Spanish and Portuguese and as an associate dean in the Division of Arts and Humanities at Berkeley. First, to just let you know how it is and why it was that I immediately said yes to the request to sponsor this project. One was just an immediate consideration, which is that we regularly teach courses on the Spanish Civil War and its memory in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. I've taught those courses periodically, and it's a course that takes students, undergraduate students, through the history of the war and then through the various forms of remembrance through art, literature, film, biography, etc. And one of the things that we do in that course regularly is to go to the Bancroft Library, and students get to see firsthand the extraordinary materials that are held there, among them Merriman's papers. And it's one of the most moving moments for many students in the course to connect with a former Berkeley student and to actually kind of see firsthand or touch papers, to see posters, to kind of connect with the reality of the war. And so when I heard of this project, it seemed like an obviously natural fit in the context of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. And also beyond Spain, many of you know this, but some might not. The memory of the Spanish Civil War is a pretty broad phenomenon in the Spanish-speaking world and is connected to a very sad history of a pattern that was inaugurated with the Spanish Civil War, in which a democracy is overthrown by a dictatorship successfully, if you think about Latin American history. So it was from that vantage point that I immediately said yes to this project. As a part of the bureaucratic machinery of Berkeley, there has to be a sponsoring unit, and it seemed like the Department of Spanish and Portuguese would be a natural fit, and I of course said yes enthusiastically. In my capacity as associate dean in the Division of Arts and Humanities, there's just another thread that I would emphasize, which is that outside of departments of history, it is in the departments of the humanities and the arts where students confront the past and think about the ways in which the past comes to us. So that's just another a strand running through this. And I'm really happy to be here, both in my capacity as a former chair and as an associate dean to support this marvelous project. The last thing I'll say is, and I think this is to pick up on something that Estelle emphasized, the plaque and its physical presence on campus is a way of making a history visible to students as they walk around campus, even if it's just to ask who was this person, in a way that I think is very important if we distinguish between history and historiography and the books that are written and the broader question of collective memory. Plaques like this one are a way for the institution actually to acknowledge and preserve and actually hold for the future the memory of the Civil War and the memory of Robert Merriman. So again, I'm very, very pleased to be here, and thank everybody who's worked so hard to get us here.
Thank you both so much. And I actually had the chance to meet one of our next speakers, Donna Southard, when we taught a sophomore seminar in 2016, the 80th anniversary of the war, where we gave students the opportunity to work in that archive, and it was an incredible experience. So all of these things connect up in powerful ways. Hence, given my prior prompt, there are three more people I'd like to welcome. Ray Hoff, son of Harold Hoff of the Valb; Bob Fitzgerald, son of Daniel Fitzgerald, also a volunteer and a Berkeley grad student in sociology; and Josh Freeman, who is the nephew of Jack Freeman, who was part of the VALB and killed in action in Spain. Welcome to you all. Now I have the pleasure of formally introducing Donna Southard and Claude Potts, whose names you've heard a number of times. Donna is a continuing lecturer and assistant director of language instruction in UC Berkeley's Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and she will direct the Madrid Study Abroad program this summer. Claude has served as the librarian for Romance language collections at UC Berkeley since 2007 and travels to Spain often for book fairs and acquisition trips. So please welcome Donna and Claude.
Thank you, Peter. Claude and I will talk a bit about the genesis of this project. Peter, Claude, and I first became a team in 2016 for the campus commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the Spanish Civil War. Peter would be performing his musical, Heart of Spain, and had the wonderful idea of offering a sophomore seminar on the Bay Area Lincoln Brigade records, which is one of 4 rich Spanish Civil War archival collections in UC Berkeley's Bancroft Library. So as Peter just mentioned, he invited me to co-teach the seminar. At the same time, Claude invited me to work on 2 separate library exhibitions with curator Teresa Salazar, one in the Bancroft and another featuring Spanish Civil War posters in the Townsend Center for the Humanities. I know I speak for all 3 of us when I say that these collaborations were immensely rewarding. So when Claude suggested that he and I take up this project together, I didn't have to think twice, and we immediately thought of Peter.
This was about 2 years ago when everyone began returning to campus and things were becoming normal again. We remembered that the University of Barcelona had offered the university a second casting of their plaque. But during the pandemic, the whole thing got lost in the shuffle, as many things did. So we decided to reactivate the project and enlisted Peter's enthusiasm for all things Abe Lincoln Brigade, as well as his expertise in dealing with the university bureaucracy. We wrote a proposal and it began its way through the labyrinthine approval process.
So Claude and I have spent a great deal of time scouting out boulders at the local rock and soil supplier, tramping across campus in search of possible installation sites, and finding our way through this whole process with Peter's help. The project was finally approved last spring with possible installation sites near Memorial Glade, which honors Berkeley veterans of World War II. There will also be a smaller informational plaque emphasizing the diversity of this international effort. Both plaques will be embedded in a carved stone similar to the one in Spain.
Both Donna and I also took advantage of our personal trips to Spain to meet with the research group of the University of Barcelona, known as DID Patri. The acronym stands for, in English, the Department of Didactics on Social Sciences. We were both extremely impressed with the work of our DID Patri colleagues that they're doing on the Civil War in particular. For over 20 years, they have applied their research outcomes to a range of fields, including history, archaeology, and cultural heritage, always with a focus on pedagogical applications. They're responsible for the creation of historical monuments, such as the Merriman plaque, which you see here with the artist, set in stone and installed in the area where Merriman disappeared. Because of the time differences, they couldn't join us this evening, but they sent a video which we'd like to share with you.
We are in Corbera de Ebra. At the end of March and at the beginning of April 1938, the Franco offensive on the Aragon front pushed the army of the Spanish Republic back towards the Ebro River. The 15th International Brigade was surrounded, including the Lincoln-Washington Battalion. A large part of the battalion was shot and exterminated. Many officers and senior commanders died, disappeared, or were captured. Among them, Robert Merriman, Chief of Staff of the 15th Brigade, one of the most famous and legendary American commanders. But who was Robert Hale Merriman? Merriman was born in 1908, a California native. He was a brilliant student. Later, he obtained a doctoral scholarship from the University of California at Berkeley and pursued his doctoral studies in economics. For 2 years, he gained military knowledge in the ROTC, the Reserve Officers Training Corps, at the University of Nevada, reaching the rank of second lieutenant in reserve. In 1932, he married Marion Stone and worked at the University of Berkeley as a teaching assistant. A few months later, the Spanish Civil War broke out. In January 1937, Robert Merriman recruited young American volunteers and assumed the responsibilities on the staff of the 15th International Brigade. He participated in the fighting at Brunete and in the Battle of Jarama, where he was wounded. He was wounded again at the Battle of Belchite. However, he continued the fight. Shortly afterward, he became the Chief of Staff of the 15th International Brigade and participated in the brutal fighting at the Battle of Teruel. On March 9, 1938, Franco's troops went on the offensive and broke the Republic front in Aragon. General Rojo tried to contain the advance, but the power of Franco's divisions caused the Republican units to retreat. At the end of March, the 15th International Brigade was fighting for Terra Alta, already in Catalonia. Between March 30th and 31st, after 3 days of camping in the town of Corbera de Ebra, they took positions along the Algarz River. The Lincoln Washington Battalion was deployed northwest of the town of Batea, but on April 1st, it received the order to withdraw. The Republican units and the fascist forces competed to reach the Ebro first. The Franco supporters were faster and occupied Corbera de Ebra on April 2nd. The soldiers of the Lincoln Washington Battalion approached Corbera de Ebra during the night of that same day, April 2nd. Around 10 p.m., Robert Merriman and Edgar Cody were shot dead in a vineyard near Corbera. However, there is a possibility that they were captured and taken to a house in the town to be interrogated and executed. In the spring of 2017, the DiPatri Research Group at the University of Barcelona, with the collaboration of researchers from the International Brigades and local scholars in the area, began an archaeological excavation in Corbera de Ebra. Some witnesses had identified a place where an International Brigade officer had been buried in April 1938. A metal detector was used in the area. A lot of ammunition, bullets, projectiles, and shrapnel were obtained. However, the information from the georadar showed no evidence that there had been a grave in the area. Robert Merriman, a hero of the left, has not yet been located. The memory of him and his presence is still alive. His remains may still be in one of the fields around Corbera de Ebra. In 2018, the DiPatri Research Group installed a monument in the memory of Robert Merriman in Corbera de Ebra, at the place where he's believed to have been executed. It is a bronze sculpture by the artist Mar H. Ponchilupi. The plaque is dedicated to Merriman and all the fighters of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade of the 15th International Brigade. Our hope is that a duplicate of this plaque will be installed on the University of Berkeley campus as a gift from our University of Barcelona and the DiPatri Research Group to yours. This plaque would commemorate international troops coming together and honor an academic who fought for his ideals and those of many others.
just to note, as Donna and Claude have mentioned, that the plaque that you see on the stone there is the plaque that Did Patry agreed to recast, create another casting and send to UC Berkeley, which is how this whole thing got started. And obviously we owe a considerable debt of thanks to Did Patry, a huge debt of gratitude. And just to give us some timing, Merriman was 30 years old when he disappeared behind enemy lines in Spain. So I'm now moving forward, thrilled to introduce my longtime friend and ALBA stalwart, Richard Bermak. Richard is a documentary photographer, writer, and labor journalist, and he has been working with ALBA, helping to produce their annual Bay Area commemorative events for over 25 years. He's the author of Front Lines of Social Change, Veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, published by Berkeley's own Heyday Press. Richard.
Well, thank you, Peter. And I just want to encourage everyone to watch that link if they get a chance, because I got to see it. And it's a really beautiful film, and beautiful to hear the music and the narration of it. Robert Merriman organized many students to volunteer. The following is from a letter in the UC Bancroft archives from some of the other UC students who fought in Spain. Greetings from the ranks of the American section of the International Brigade, the Golden Bear Squad, to all students. We are in Spain because the liberty and democracy of the Spanish people is being attacked by international fascism. We know that the struggle of the Spanish people's front is also our struggle, because the victory of fascism in Spain would directly aid and strengthen the reactionaries in our own country and speed all humanity into another war. It is our hope that all lovers of democracy will recognize the injustice of the loyalist cause, the justice of the loyalist cause, and help them to defeat the fascist invaders. We are proud to carry the name and spirit of the University of California into the frontline trenches in this battle for world peace. Signed, Mark Billings, Dick Cloak, Cecil Cole, Raymond Durham, Jerry Quigley, Clifton Amsbury, and Don McLeod. What motivated these students and other Americans and volunteers from all over the world to go to Spain? What did the Spanish Republic represent to them, and why, 90 years later, does their sacrifices still resonate worldwide? In the 1930s, the flames of fascism were spreading all over the world. Spain offered a glimmer of hope. For centuries, under the thumb of a king and the church, Spain was one of the poorest and most backward countries in Europe. The newly formed republic instituted universal health care, education, economic reform, women's rights, and religious freedom. In response to these progressive programs, General Franco invaded, aided by Hitler and Mussolini, and the church declared a holy war against the republic. The U.S. was still in the midst of worldwide Great Depression, suffering from massive inequality and unemployment. Workers endured horrible conditions, including leading to labor unrest, demonstrations, and strikes. Labor historian Irving Bernstein referred to these times as the turbulent years. The question of the day was whether the unrest would be solved by progressive reforms like those attempted by the Spanish Republic, or through brutal repression, socialism or fascism. Robert Merriman was a doctoral student of economics in Berkeley. Along with his wife Marion, he was involved with progressive causes. During a summer break, Robert worked in a Ford assembly plant and witnessed the plight of workers. Later that year, 1934, longshore workers in San Francisco went on strike, along with other Pacific Coast maritime workers, shutting down most of the ports of the West Coast. When Cal football coach recruited football players to scab on the strikers, the Merrimans organized campus demonstrations against the football team and helped with publicity. The strike led to the creation of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, one of the most progressive unions in the country and a major supporter of the Lincoln Brigade. Many ILW members fought in Spain, and they took in vets after the war who were being harassed by the U.S. government. The TriStar, The symbol of the International Brigades stood for the unity of all races and occupations. Berkeley Golden Bear Squadron member Ray Durham was an African American, as was Lincoln Battalion Commander Oliver Law, who would be the first American to command white troops, an accomplishment the Lincoln Brigade was proud of. Chi Cheng, who came from China to America to study at Cal and later transferred to the University of Minnesota, also volunteered with the Lincoln Battalion. When the vets returned from Spain, they formed the Veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade organization to aid Spanish refugees and to continue their fight against fascism and social justice. The U.S. government responded by labeling them as subversives. Lincoln veterans were harassed by the FBI and blacklisted for many years, but they kept on fighting for social justice. They were on the front lines of progressive struggles and marched with banners against the war in Vietnam, U.S. intervention in Central America, the Gulf Wars. They fought for civil rights and other causes. They would inspire younger generations of activists. They formed posts around the country. Marion Merriman Wachtel, who had accompanied Robert in Spain, became a commander of the Bay Area Post. Marion, like Bob, was an organizer. One of her accomplishments was to recruit Bruce Barthol, who produced and performed musical programs telling the story of the Spanish Civil War and the Lincoln Brigade for annual VALB events. When I got involved in 1980, nearly 1,000 people would attend these events, raising money for progressive causes. The Bay Area Post created one of the largest Lincoln Brigade monuments, a 50-foot mural on the San Francisco Embarcadero, an historic site which had been the battleground of the Longshoremen General Strike. Why do we create monuments and plaques? To inspire future generations to get involved in the problems of the world and to fight for the rights of others. Our next speaker, a longtime friend, Linda Lustig, is a daughter of veteran Dave Smith. She has helped organize Lincoln Brigade events and worked on the Monument Planning Committee along with other children of the vets. She will talk more about keeping the legacy of this struggle alive. Linda.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this event. My father, Dave Smith, was a volunteer with the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, and in his words, quote, "Spain changed my whole life. I saw a country struggling, ordinary people, peasants, poor people. They couldn't even read or write. But when these young people came up to the front, we became an integrated army, the people struggling against the oppressive group of fascists. It left an indelible impression on my mind. So when I got back, I decided that I was going to be committed to furthering the cause of the people, whatever I did." And that is what he did. So after returning from Spain, he worked as a machinist and a union organizer. However, over the years, there were negative effects from a serious shoulder wound that he got while he was in Spain, and he couldn't do the machinist job anymore. So he went back to college and finished his BA and then got a master's of education and became a science teacher. He taught for many years in middle and high school and eventually became the head of his local teachers union. In later years, he gave many talks about his experiences in Spain to college students, mostly in the Northeast where he was living. He also worked on a precursor to the wonderful ALBA teaching institutes, beginning to work on curriculum, which didn't really go anywhere till ALBA really started the teaching institutes. But he was always totally into education. And I think that came partly from being in Spain. He said in downtime, they spent time trying to work with the young people who'd volunteered who were illiterate, trying to teach them how to read. And that stuck with him to the point when he was teaching science, and he got the courses, among others, for the kids who were not going to be science majors, the required courses for the other kids. And the teachers asked him, "How is it possible that these kids are doing better in your class than they ever did before?" And he said, "Well, the first thing you have to do is teach them to read. They can't answer the questions if they don't understand what's in front of them." So he kept that on his whole life. As a child, I slowly learned about his participation in the Spanish Civil War, but also learned to never mention it in public. I never expected it to be possible to be part of public education events and work with my father and innumerable others on the San Francisco Bay Area Monument, which was completed in 2008. It took us 8 years to get that going. I wanted to connect that monument with the work from people from Berkeley who helped at that time when we decided we needed it at a place somewhat near the ILWU supporters who originally helped us with attempting to get a spot, which took years through the San Francisco bureaucracy. So it's at the Embarcadero in San Francisco. But among the supporters, early supporters, was Russ Ellis, a former vice chancellor and sociologist here at Berkeley, now retired, and also Walter Hood, who had never heard of the Spanish Civil War until we sent out a request for being part of a competition to make the monument. And he and Anne Chamberlain responded, and in order to do that, he studied a lot about the Spanish Civil War and became very active with us. Over the years, he spent endless hours at community and city meetings, ensuring that the project would move forward. This must have been 10 or 20 times what we had originally asked him to do and paid him for, and he never asked for another cent. By the way, Walter's also a MacArthur Award recipient. My connection to Berkeley began as an undergraduate in the early 1960s. I was arrested during the free speech movement, where I also met my husband in the process. He later became an associate vice chancellor at Berkeley, now retired, and he's on the board of the FSM archives, which are in the process of being donated to the Bancroft Library. Cal has both a memorial to the free speech movement and the Free Speech Movement Cafe, where students interact with each other, encounter information about the free speech movement, and there are always current periodicals as part of this to read and stay informed about the world. It's wonderful to know that the people who've worked on this memorial have already gone through the elaborate administrative processes to make it possible. And it feels a little late, given not in terms of the work people have done, but given how long the memorials have been there for veterans of World War II, and these preceded them. It's also fitting that it won't be too far from the Bancroft Library, housing the archives, the Merriman Archives, where the current students are able to study, as people have mentioned before. It's just really important, not just to us as family members, myself and all the others who've worked for years on different projects, but to know that people who never heard of the Spanish Civil War might be interested when they see that plaque, when there's a real person involved who came from Berkeley, and encourage them to learn more and think about what they want to do with their lives, which was really the impetus for the larger monument in San Francisco that has quotes from lots of people and is really focused on activism both then and in the future. Thank you again for being part of this.
Thank you so much, Linda. Working with you and your father and others on the SF monument was an incredible experience for me, one of the greatest of my life. And I've spent a lot of time here on campus in my teaching, bringing the 60s and the free speech movement and the politics of that period alive for my students. And you and Steve were kind enough to visit one of my classes during the Zoom year and talk about your experiences during the FSM. And that was an incredible experience for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would now like to welcome the scholar and artist, Alex Sohm-Pascual, who will share some of her work with us. Alex is Associate Professor of Contemporary Spanish Literature and New Media here at UC Berkeley. Her digital artwork and poetry have been exhibited in galleries and art festivals internationally. Alex.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me here, and also thank you to Claude and Donna and Peter for organizing this. When Claude asked me to participate in this event, I wasn't very sure what to do, and I think it had to do with my own personal relation to the Spanish Civil War. I'm from Spain, I grew up there, and I grew up during a period called La Transición, so the Spanish transition from dictatorship to democracy. And this is an interesting period in Spain because it's a period very much surrounded by mystery, silence, forgetting. It's actually being called the period of the Pacto de Silencio, right? So the pact of silence that kept many Spaniards from wondering, talking, or discussing anything about the war. So it actually took a while for me to even know what the Spanish Civil War was, to learn my family's role in it. And I had to come to the United States and go to grad school here and become a teacher here. And now I teach classes about the Spanish Civil War, and I am going through my own period of remembering. And I think this is very important, a question like a plaque like this in this context. So I'm going to share a couple poems with you that I wrote, not really knowing at the beginning that they were about the Spanish Civil War, and then eventually realizing, as Peter has said, I work with media, digital media, so these may be a little bit strange for those of you who've never encountered digital literature. They're interactive, so I'm going to actually just run through one of them, but the idea is that each person would have their own engagement with these poems. Okay. This poem is called Room 2. I always talk about poetry as if being in a room. This is how I've been trained, at least. It is usually a white room, bright salt, dark cobalt blue, rich mineral soil. I am usually alone in that room, but like salt or cobalt, you have been here before, and like you, others. We all live traces, sweet water, monkey form or not. Some of us disappear into the earth, inside a little and turquoise box with vintage yet millennial pink flowers around the edge, into a progress bar, mint green below, into a cycle or circle of completion. Some of us are made to disappear. What does it mean to disappear? Does it look like this? Or like this? Or was it like this? Or was it this disappeared? I never liked pears. They're gritty, a mouthful of syrup and sand. Or this. Spain commissioned 1,200 mass graves, 100,000 buried unmarked graves. Spain, Amnesty International, missing persons, mass graves. How do you make someone disappear? Where do you take them? What do you tell them? What do you do with their hands, their feet, their teeth? There's hundreds of thousands of hands and feet buried under freeways, dams, and playgrounds in my country. These great people will never be collected. I sometimes think about poetry as if formed or formless or form, those hundreds, those thousands, we're not traces. We're diamonds with Lucy, we're true salt, we're something close to baby sky blue and no more buried cobalt blue. Because these are interactive poems, I collect all the data. And what I like to do is then analyze this data. And I actually made a poem with the results of the first 44 participants I invited to play with this poem. And the results were fascinating. Obviously, when you have to pick a dot, they all look exactly the same, and yet people have preferences. So that was interesting. So I wrote a report. What does it mean to disappear? I asked this question to a self-selected group of 44 anonymous participants during the months of February to June 2020. 40.91% of them understood disappearance to mean disintegrated into 3 short and consecutive dashes, and out of which, dash, 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 or perhaps in of which, dash, 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 100% selected a single dot to contain the fleeting essence of what they mean by void. Unfortunately, the data revealed some discrepancies about which exact dot, reflected best the response's sense of disappearing. Alas, here are the limitations of representing the incommensurable vastness of the universe using dots. Faced against the limits of human comprehension, 23 participants believed non-existence to take the shape of a fruit, i.e. a pear, More significantly, 56.82% of respondents selected mass graves as synonym of disappearing, while 43.18% confirmed that there's hundreds of thousands of hands and feet buried under freeways, dams, and playgrounds in their country. I never understood numbers, thus I can only confirm that dash 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 equals mass graves. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for your work. Thanks. So to close the formal program, before the Q&A, Estelle, Claude, Donna, and Michael will read some passages from Marion Stone Merriman Wachtel's book, American Commander in Spain, co-written with Warren LaRude, and also from Robert Merriman's diaries, which we understand are now available online. And if people are interested, they can let us know and we can make that link available. So readers, it's yours.
Sorry, everybody. I'm pulling up my reading now. Okay, so we're going to read several passages from American Commander in Spain, which was by Marion Merriman and Warren LaRude. From the beginning, Berkeley sparked Bob's energies as Reno never had. As one of the world's great universities, Cal generated brain power that scanned and probed the serious problems not only of the nation, but of the world. At Berkeley, Bob began to reach deeply into life itself, beyond himself, beyond the campus. In that autumn of 1932, America's central problem was economic despair. Abroad, some Europeans had shifted into new political and economic processes, including the very different system the United States was beginning to recognize formally in the Soviet Union. Economics and its repercussions were natural preoccupations for the Berkeley students, whose logic ran as cool as their passions ran hot. One professor inspired such passion and attempted to guide the logic. His name was Dr. Ira B. Cross. He was the head of the Department of Economics, where Bob was appointed a teaching fellow. A skeptic, Dr. Cross had a demanding credo for the exceptional, often brilliant students from around the world who competed for admittance to the University of California's economics department. Find new ways to make it a better world, he told them. This is your duty. There are solutions, but you must work hard to find them. The world must improve. Without you, it won't happen. It's that simple. You, the gifted ones with the brains and the energy, you make the difference. Old Doc Yak, as I affectionately called him, prodded his students specifically about the Depression. You can't let a third of the nation starve or sit idle without jobs, he said. It's up to you in the universities to think the nation's way toward solutions. Find a way to make things better. Think.
Thank you, Estelle. I must say we're privileged to have Warren LaRude in the audience tonight. We actually chose these readings from Marion and Merriman's book and the book that they both co-wrote before we knew who was coming. So what a treat to read your text in your presence. So I'm going to read another passage. There it goes. Bob Merriman began to shift that autumn of 1936 from observer to activist. He began to argue that it was up to free men to do something about fascism. It was no longer enough to merely oppose it in thought. Now, having seen for himself the spreading power of Hitler, Bob began to talk about setting aside his studies. Bob talked increasingly about war, the war in Spain. I was scared to death because it was so absolutely serious. The newspapers of Moscow carried more and more stories about the fascist rebellion turning into a full-blooded war. The troops of Francisco Franco were using all of their might to crush the democratically elected Republic of Spain. What's more, the news in Pravda and Izvestia, the major Russian papers, tied the fascist effort in Spain to Hitler's plans for the conquest of Europe. The international community in Moscow buzzed with rumors about Hitler sending direct aid, troops, tanks, and planes to the Spanish rebel Franco. Word was that Italy's Mussolini was doing the same. Bob had begun to develop a gut feeling when he saw the depressed people and bullet-pocked walls of Vienna. The news reports about death and destruction in Spain moved the subject from threat to reality. America in 1936 was not alarmed about war, but Moscow was. The Russians, alert to the bloodshed of their own recent revolution, remembered too the invasions their country had suffered through history. In Moscow, there was a feeling that Hitler could strike from beyond the hills to the southeast without notice at any time. Hitler's participation in Spain confirmed the Russians' fear that they too could be once again invaded.
Thanks, Claude. In the next two passages, Bob's wife, Marion, describes two different experiences she had in Spain, one in the city of Murcia and one in Madrid. Despite the war around us, being with Bob in Murcia made me happy. We stayed together in his room in the International Hospital. One morning as I awoke, a wild wailing reached through the corridors into our room and terrified me. Bob, too, was awakened. He saw my fear, reached over to calm me, then broke into laughter. "Don't be alarmed," he said. It was only the maid out in the hall singing flamenco. I'd never heard the eerie, wild Spanish music before, but I grew quickly to love it. Now in Madrid, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we were pulling out of a gas station near the post office, and we heard a dull, vibrating thud and saw a puff of smoke and dust go up from the bank down the street. People scattered like leaves in a storm, and our bewildered driver stopped in the middle of the open square, but not for long. We raced up a narrow street and parked the car on the sheltered side. Fortunately, I thought, the shells from artillery can't come straight down between the buildings. Bob and others calmly joined a larger crowd around the corner, out on the boulevard, to see what was happening. I decided to stay in the car, but a moment later, the shelling began again. I was frightened into a cold sweat of terror. At first, there was a moment of what seemed like dead silence. Then the noise of the shelling exploded, the burst of the artillery surrounding every part of me, my mind, my head, my eyes, my shoulders, my entire body immersed in the horrible sound. I jumped from the car and ran down the street. My God, this sucks up all the air into silence, and then the explosion bursts and the air is gone, and the silence is overwhelming again. My screams froze in my throat. I ran to Bob, who made me stand quietly against a wall until I got over my terror. I wasn't as much hysterical as I was angry. All I could think was, the bastards, the bastards, the bastards. I couldn't say a thing.
Great. And so what I'm going to read are field notes from Merriman's diary, give us an account of one of the battles in which he participated, the Battle of Jarama, and there are 4 entries. February 16th, 1937. Worked all night and early morning. Trenches. Just before daylight, panic. Cubans fired and Irish followed. Also wounded own men. Took up new outline. Went to staff meeting and officers, and Nathan gave word to be in reserve. Talked to officers. Marion, dear, I love you. I'm willing to die for my ideas. May I live for them and you. February 25th and 26th. Found one of our men and sent him with word to bring all men across road into trench. Instead, all men withdrew and left gaps, and Dimitrov's men withdrew and left. Pick and me with 800 meters of trench and open space and only a few hand grenades. Pick finally had to go, and finally I went through Olive Orchard, found men all in rear and Pick leading them to trench. Lucky no men lost. Never found out who gave the order to retreat. Moved into trench and started to dig across road on left to set up supply base connection. Dimitrov had lost 30 men here and yet had never dug a trench. First day hard and several men lost. By second day, Labor Battalion had improved situation and we were better off. Moved battalion headquarters into front line. Stember went below and caused talk. At meeting of staff, was Franco-Belge battalion criticized for not advancing when English did. In general, brigade has had a bad time. Numbers small and enemy heavily armed with machine guns, tough front and long retreat. February 27th and 28th. Capture of English section has not helped in general. Battalion much smaller after 23rd attack and rest needed, but impossible since trenches which we inherited are shallow and poor. First day, boys had little to eat and drink since it meant death to carry food across road. Mood gradually improved. Staff planned to give each battalion rest and wash up down below. On night of 26, captured prisoner, and he gave information which coincided with ours, and late at night attack was planned. Airplanes, tanks, armored cars, artillery, cavalry, first aid, men, and attack to be on our right. 24th Brigade and Americans to protect their left flank after they had passed in 50 yards or more. Pivot movement to road, then our brigade to move. Plan good and sounded like good use of arms. Early on 27th, weather bad and attack put off until 10. At 9:50, artillery started, and at 10, 24th Brigade to go forward. February 29th, we waited without promised machine guns, without telephone, artillery going to left and not helping us, or 24th Brigade either. Armored cars behind hill, no tanks in evidence, no horses. 24th failed to move forward. Ceiling low, no planes. Klaus near front sent word for us to advance. Finally got through telephone by ourselves and established bad communications. Stated several times that 24th had not advanced. Machine gun fire on our boys too heavy for any action. Plan of attack fell to pieces all along the line. Our boys, plenty brave. Runners went down one by one. Great boys, and it grieved me to see them go. Kopik finally phoned me and bawled me out for failing to move at 10 o'clock. I said the 24th had not yet moved, and he said that they were ahead of us 700 yards and we were seeing their second line. He gave us 15 minutes to make up this distance. He was never more wrong in his life. We had put out our airplane signal. Joe Streisand lost during this, and the order was to put it out in our most advanced position. After call from Kopik, I observed signal of the 24th Brigade, and it was 100 meters behind our trench even yet. Nothing to do since our boys in field and out of runners. 3 planes came instead of 20 and didn't do much. No runner, so I passed on signal to advance and try to break through. Saw Springhall coming toward me. When I climbed up, passed on signal and was wounded. Mudo dressed me up and gave word to the leader of Franco-Belges to move some men into our trench to back us up.
Thank you, Michael, and everyone who read. It's powerful material, and I believe, as we've noted, that some of the diary material is much of it is available here in the Bancroft. So we're going to take a few minutes for Q&A before we wrap up, and I have a couple of questions I can respond to right now or open to the panel. But if you have questions, feel free to enter them into the question function at the bottom of your screen, and we will see if we can get to a few in the next 3 or 4 minutes. Josh Freeman says, given the widespread attacks on free speech from the right, always, of course, viciously disguised as free speech, has there been any pushback on the creation of this memorial at UCB? And my basic answer was that there hasn't been, but I wondered if anyone else on the panel, Claude or Donna, had any response to that or any thoughts about that.
No, Donna, you're muted.
We haven't had any pushback, but I'm not sure how much publicity there has been. So that might be something that happens in the future.
Yeah, true. And as I mentioned in my answer to Joshua, the letter from Did Patry came to Carol Christ, and when the Bancroft Library was unable to house the plaque, that letter made its way to a variety of other folks on campus, including eventually Claude and Donna, and that's how this whole thing came about. So it in fact has moved its way through the campus bureaucracy in a rather impressive way, and getting this accomplished has been significant. Mark asks, am I correct in remembering that there was a plaque on Virginia Street at the house where Merriman lived? I believe there is. Is anyone more familiar with that than I am? But yes, I believe a student here championed that particular plaque just to mark where Merriman had lived on the Berkeley campus. Anyone else have any thoughts about that or comments about that?
Yes,
Go ahead, Donna. Go ahead, Donna.
it's there. Claude knew about it and he took me to see it.
Yeah, Claude.
It was created by the city. Actually, it's a city plaque. So, but it is where Marion and Robert lived when he was a graduate student here, and they lived in a small, I think it was a 1-bedroom apartment, which if you've read much about Merriman through other places, you know, he actually lived there with all of a couple of her younger sisters as well during the Depression, and even they were generous and took in other students that needed housing too. So they were really, it was a crowded little apartment, I guess. But so nice that it's close to campus. It's on Virginia and Euclid. So it would be a nice little walk for people interested in the Spanish Civil War and the volunteers, if they could walk to the two monuments and walk over to San Francisco too and see the big monuments.
Both are worth seeing, and the one on the Embarcadero indeed is worth a visit, and you might have walked by it without really knowing it's there. It is in the shadow of perhaps one of the most hideous fountains in San Francisco, which is the Heckscher Fountain right down there across from the Ferry Building. So it dwarfs it, but it also triumphs over it in its aesthetics. It's beautiful, and its history. So a couple of comments. Alan Warren writes, a real challenge transcribing Merriman's diaries. His writing was very hard to read, but a great honor and privilege to transcribe. Ray Hoff deserves a round of thanks, Ray's here today, for his hard work in supplementary material explaining the background to the diaries. So that's very helpful. And now to find the third diary taken by from Marion after his capture. And someone has noted, Alan also noted that Martin Zerman was the one who put that plaque up. Any other questions before we close today? Any other questions people would like to ask answered or have answered before we close? Someone notes that Marion is buried in the Alta Mesa Memorial Park in Palo Alto. It would be good to honor her, and thanks for that, Ray. And in fact, I'd been trying to find descendants of Marion here in the States and had not succeeded, but one of her nephews is actually in our audience today and will hopefully be able to make some more contact. So you're absolutely right. Marion was an impressive figure in her own right. So I'm going to move to our closing here and thank all of you for spending time with us today. Joining us here. This is just the beginning. If you're able to make a contribution today, please do. Claude, I think we'll be able to share links and an email address in the chat, or if you think of it after you leave here, you can simply go to the Spanish and Portuguese Department's website, spanish-portuguese.berkeley.edu, and you'll see a photograph of the Lincoln Lincoln volunteers there. And you can click on the link and make a donation. Share the website with your friends who might be interested. Spread the word. This is a man who needs to be remembered. As you've heard all this afternoon, this evening, his story, along with the stories of his wife, Marion, and a dozen other students from this campus are an essential and little-known part of UC Berkeley's past that deserve recognition for years to come. There are only a handful of memorials in the United States to the anti-fascist volunteers in the Spanish Civil War. Merriman was one of its undeniable heroes. There were many, many, many heroes. Obviously, 2,700 Americans volunteered to go to Spain, and a third of them died there. So this memorial should be another. Thanks everyone for participating, the panel, so much for your work, and thanks everyone for joining us today. And feel free to reach out and contact us if you have questions in the future. Thanks so much.
Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Que sea cubierta de gloria, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Que sea cubierta de gloria, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Mercenarios y fascistas, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Mercenarios y fascistas, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Solo es nuestro deseo, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Solo es nuestro deseo, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Acabar con el fascismo, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Acabar con el fascismo, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. En los frentes de Jarama, rumba la rumba la rumba la. En los frentes de Jarama, rumba la rumba la rumba la. No tenemos ni aviones, ni tanques, ni cañones, ay Manuela. No tenemos ni aviones, ni tanques, ni cañones, ay Manuela. Ya salimos de España, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Ya salimos de España, rumba la rumba la rumba la. A luchar en los frentes, ay Manuela, ay Manuela.